What would you do if you saw a woman who hadn't walked for 20 years suddenly rise to her feet, not because of doctors, not because of money, not because of science, but because of a poor black maid who carried a secret no one could explain? Stay with me till the end, because this story will shock you, break your heart, and heal your soul all at once. And if you love powerful real-life stories like this, make sure you subscribe right now, so you never miss the next life-changing tale. Asterisk. The mansion on the hill had always been a place of whispers. Neighbors spoke of its wealth, its marble floors, its endless windows overlooking the city, but inside those walls lived a woman who had not taken a step in 2 decades. Elizabeth Monroe, a millionaire mother, once a celebrated socialite in New York and London, had been confined to a golden wheelchair after an accident shattered her spine. Doctors called it irreversible. Therapists tried and failed. Faith healers prayed. Scientists experimented. But Elizabeth remained trapped in silence, her body alive but her legs dead. Her son, Daniel Monroe, now a 30-year-old billionaire tech investor, had turned cold and hardened, carrying the guilt that his mother's accident had happened when he was just a boy. No one spoke of it openly, but Elizabeth's life had become a museum of sorrow, beautiful on the outside, broken within. Into this house walked someone no one expected, a new black maid named Grace, hired from the city agency, with nothing but a worn-out bag, calloused hands, and eyes that carried storms of both suffering and hope. From the first day, she was different. Unlike the polished servants who whispered about Elizabeth's condition, Grace treated her not as a fragile millionaire in a chair, but as a mother, a woman, a human being who had been forgotten by life. Grace sang old gospel hymns while cleaning. She touched Elizabeth's hand when no one dared. She spoke of faith, resilience, and miracles, not as if they were distant, but as if they were alive in her very veins. And Elizabeth, for the first time in 20 years, found herself laughing small at first, then louder, until even the butlers stared in disbelief. Grace had no medical degree, no wealth, no connections, but she had a secret. Her grandmother had been known in the South as a healer, a woman whose prayers moved people doctors had abandoned. Grace never boasted of it, but in her silence and touch, Elizabeth felt something flicker in her legs she hadn't felt in decades. But just as hope began to bloom, shadows of doubt entered. Daniel, her son, suspicious of this maid, who seemed to work miracles, began to dig into Grace's past. What he uncovered would twist everything upside down. Daniel Monroe was not a man who trusted easily. He had built his billion-dollar empire on logic, precision, and technology, not on faith, not on miracles, and certainly not on maids, who claimed nothing yet sparked impossible change. He began secretly following Grace. He discovered she lived in a rundown apartment in Harlem, supporting 2 younger siblings, while sending money to her grandmother in Alabama. But deeper than poverty was a record. Grace had once been arrested during a protest, a CCUSE, falsely of theft in a supermarket. Though charges were dropped, her name was scarred in the system. Daniel confronted her, his voice sharp, accusing her of manipulating his mother for sympathy, for money, for a chance at wealth. Grace's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stood strong. "I don't want your money, sir. I want your mother to remember she is alive." That night, Elizabeth overheard the fight. For the first time in years, she shouted at her son from the wheelchair, her voice echoing through the mansion. "You think money is everything? But this girl has given me more life in 2 weeks than you have in 20 years. Daniel stood, frozen. His mother had not raised her voice in decades, but it was only the beginning. A storm struck that night, thunder shaking the walls, and in the darkness, Elizabeth called for Grace. Grace placed her hands on Elizabeth's legs and whispered prayers her grandmother had taught her. Something happened. Elizabeth gasped, tears streaming as her toes moved, tiny, trembling, but real. The house erupted in chaos. Doctors were summoned. Specialists ran tests. They called it impossible. Yet Elizabeth could feel sparks of life where there had been none. But with the miracle came danger. News leaked out. Journalists camped outside. Religious leaders demanded interviews. And Daniel, torn between protecting his mother and controlling the chaos, grew more desperate. The truth was spreading. With it came vultures who wanted to exploit Grace. By the end of the week, a powerful figure from Daniel's past arrived at the mansion, a rival billionaire who had once courted Elizabeth and now wanted control of the story. He offered to buy Grace's services for millions. Grace refused. But he was not a man who accepted no. The rival billionaire, Richard Hale, began a campaign to discredit Grace, leaking her past arrests, painting her as a fraud, a manipulator, preying on a vulnerable old woman. Social media exploded. Half the world called her a saint. The other half called her a scam. Daniel, once her accuser, now stood torn. He had seen his mother's toes move, her knees twitch, her eyes glow with life. Was Grace real, or was it all coincidence? Elizabeth herself silenced the noise when one morning, during a heated argument between Daniel and Richard in the grand dining hall, she suddenly gripped the edge of the table, pushed, and rose. The room froze. For 20 years she had not walked. But now, trembling, stumbling, clutching Grace's hand, she took one step, then another, and another. Cameras captured it. The world gasped. Doctors wept. Daniel fell to his knees, tears flooding his face. Richard Hale, defeated, stormed out, as Elizabeth whispered words that would be remembered forever. She gave me back my life, not with money, but with love. The miracle changed everything. Daniel publicly defended Grace, clearing her name, investing in her family, and declaring her the reason his mother lived again. Elizabeth did not just walk, she danced, she traveled, she stood on stages telling her story. Grace became part of the family, not as a maid, but as a daughter of the house. But the greatest twist came years later. Daniel confessed that his company, built on artificial intelligence, had been inspired by people, not machines. He declared, Grace the human miracle no machine could replicate. And Elizabeth, now walking freely, spent her life advocating for forgotten women, for black maids, for the poor, proving that true healing is not found in wealth, but in compassion. And so the mansion that was once a house of silence became a house of song, laughter, and footsteps, footsteps of a millionaire mother who had risen from her chair and walked into the world again.